And then the chapter ends in verse 48 here. And this is a verse that most of us have heard or read several times before. And as we said about an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, we are asked to be perfect here. Be ye therefore perfect. We're asked to be perfect after all these things that he's just gone through. So he's bringing these disciples through these requirements to help them to progress forward through this ritual and these covenants probably. And then he tells them how they need to act once they've accepted these covenants. And then he says to them, be ye therefore perfect. But of course, the problem with that is justice, because we're not. And so how do we become perfect when we're not perfect? And that's part of the atonement. That's what the atonement is for. Now, an interesting difference in the Sermon on the Mount, or as John Welch calls it, the Sermon at the Temple in the Book of Mormon, is that the word therefore is moved in the phrase. And instead of be ye therefore perfect, it is therefore I would that ye should be perfect. So what this does is this turns this into a transitionary phrase, a transitionary verse, where, okay, you've gone through all of these things, now, or therefore, you're going to be perfect. You need to be perfect at this point. And this is, again, an ascension text, as we would call it. You're moving up the glories, or you're moving up the requirements. You're moving through the progression of a temple until you get to perfection. And as now President Nelson covers in the manual, he talks about the Greek word for perfection, which is teleos. And there's a couple of additional things that we might want to add to this word that gives us a little bit of meat. And that is, this is the term that was used for temple religions. So religions that would have a temple would use this when they went through their temple rites, as they would call them, mystical rites, or the mysteries. We see that term often in the scriptures, mysteries. We should think about the temple when we see that word, the mysteries of God. Nephi wanting to know the mysteries of God. That is a reference to the temple and the covenants that are there and the doctrine that is in the temple. Even more specifically, it's a reference to the Sod, which is the council in heaven, and the mysteries and the words that are spoken in the council in heaven, in the pre-existence, and now even the council that's held in heaven. And that is what the mysteries refer to. And teleos is a reference to one who goes through those mysteries or through those covenants and makes it to the end of those temple rites. And they then end up perfect. And so that is, again, a temple term and a temple reference. A great reference in the New Testament to compare this chapter to is the book of Hebrews. The book of Hebrews is where we talk about Christ as the Melchizedek, the new Melchizedek. But this term teleos is used in chapters 5 and 6. And it helps us to distinguish between what is required in the lower law and what would be used in the higher law. And directly in Hebrews chapter 9, this word is used for the heavenly temple. And throughout the book of Hebrews, or the epistle of Hebrews, the word is used when putting someone in a position where they can stand before God or see the face of God or come into the presence of God. So we get a better idea of what that perfect means in verse 48. Be ye therefore perfect, or in other words, reach the end game here. Like the term we heard in the movie Field of Dreams, go the distance. An interesting quote by Joseph Smith says the following: I advise all to go on to perfection and search deeper into the mysteries of godliness. So here, the term mysteries and the term perfection, which in the Greek would be teleos, are used together by Joseph Smith here in a temple type of a phrase. So we start off in chapter 5 with Jesus ascending a mountain like Moses to give a new law and setting things up. And then we walk through the requirements to move forward, and then we're addressed directly as to how we need to act once we receive those requirements and make those covenants. And then we are told to be perfect, which would be at the end of that ascension or the end of that temple progression. And it also transitions us into chapter 6 and chapter 7 with the rest of the Sermon on the Mount that continue to bring us through this temple imagery.